guys, in front of me here is one of the greatest cars to ever come out of the 1980s. This is a 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo, one of the greatest looking, greatest driving, and just most stunning classic cars that Porsche has ever put out. Now, what if I told you that with a small modern tweak, you could turn this old 944 into an insane, modern, and capable driving experience that might even be better than the factory car? That's what we're here today to find out. Let's go for a drive. Welcome to Roads Untraveled. My name is Marcus, and this is an LS3 swapped 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo, still retaining the turbo badge on the back, even though there is no turbocharger in sight. That makes me very happy. So let's go for a drive in Will's 944. Will's a good friend of the show. He owns a shop called Automotive Racing and Development with my friend Sid and Kuma over in Richmond, BC. And this is Will's latest acquisition, okay? This is his daily driver at the moment. So we're gonna do our best not to get it impounded, and we're gonna go for a little bit of a drive and see how insane a properly done LS swapped 944 Turbo goes along on the road. So there's a lot to know about the 944. In my opinion, it is one of the greatest looking cars of all time. Definitely one of the greatest looking 80s cars of all time. And one of the quintessential pieces of the Porsche timeline that really kind of made the brand what it is today. There have been a lot of tests and failures through the years in Porsche development. You know, the first gen Boxster was a big step. The water cooled engine with the 996 in 1999, that was a big step. But back here in 86, things were still kind of crazy and still kind of very experimental over at Porsche. So under the hood of Will's 944 is an LS3 small block Chevy V8. It is straight out of a 2010 C6 Corvette. So from the factory, those are rated at about 430 horsepower at the crank. Now this one does have a set of Cook's long tube headers. It's got a few other modifications. So it put down 430 horsepower at the rear wheels and 428 pound-feet of torque. I can tell you right now, you guys, those numbers are incredibly conservative. Based on the feel I'm getting from here, it's putting down at least 450 at the wheels if you were to put this on a dyno jet. So like 4,000 RPM, 6,000. The thing is, the best thing about this car is it doesn't feel like a Corvette. That is the first thing I'm getting from this car. First impression is that it does not feel like a Corvette. I've been waiting years to drive a Porsche 944. I just think the proportions of the car, the way they are styled, it is the classic, really aggressive, wide stance, hunkered down coupe that the 80s is kind of known for. I mean, the 86 kind of has a similar vibe. Datsuns, the 240, 260, 280s, they all kind of had a similar side profile kind of shape to it. And it is just, I don't know, it makes me incredibly happy every time I see one of these, especially a turbo model. So as you can see, the front bumper on this is completely molded in and looks actually incredibly modern for an 86. And this was the first year of the 944 Turbo. So gone were the kind of not so great front bumpers on the earlier USDM specs. that needed a lot more space in the bumper, and they kind of protruded out further to, you know, comply with USDM safety standards. But in 86, the turbo finally got this fully, what I would call like the fully fleshed out, the final kind of version. Even though this is the first year of the turbo, this is kind of like the one you want out of all the 944s, from 86 to like 91 when they stopped making the turbo. And the interior as well, because the early cars in 82, the NA cars, the older ones, the interior does not look nearly this modern. So in 85, there was that facelift for the NA models, and then in 86, the turbo came out. But just looking at the interior here, while we're stuck behind regular people going regular speeds on a regular road, this has got to be one of my favorite interiors of all time, just styling-wise, looks-wise. All black, really nice, soft touch vinyl up here on the dashboard. And then we've got just wonderful materials all in here, black on black. These seats in here are not standard 944 seats. These are out of an 88 911. And you've got the Momo steering wheel here and a bunch of other things that make this pretty much just an all-round street rod, like a really good hot rod that sounds like $1 million. I mean, it sounds like all hell is broken loose, and a Corvette is just gonna come and maul your family. But you're driving a really nicely designed and kind of subtle and much smaller German sports car versus a Corvette, which, I mean, I've driven a couple Corvettes. I've driven a C6, and they're very wide cars. They're very big cars. The visibility in this car is definitely better than a C6. And the size is right. You know, you're still able to fit 265s on the back. You've got 225s up front. The torque is unbelievable. So a stock 944 from this year put out 217 horsepower. That was the top of the line model at the time. And then by the time the end of the model lineup was finishing up in 1991, the turbos were making 247 horsepower. And then there was a Turbo S that came as well that was making the same 240 horsepower, but had a bunch of other upgraded parts. All right, you guys, before we get further into the video, just real quick, I want to let you know, if you have an LS engine, we do have the LS1 and LS2 engine code jet tag designs that we currently sell on our store. I know we have a lot of new viewers actually from our recent mid-engine mini video. So if you don't have an LS and you just want to check out the entire collection, the link is in the description. We'll give you guys 10% off just for watching this video, and on with the 944. So from the factory, I was fitted with a 5-speed transaxle, and what that means is that the transmission is paired with the gearbox, a transaxle, in the rear of the car. So in essence, this is one of the most balanced sports cars that Porsche has ever made, simply because obviously if you look at the 911, it's rear engine, very rear bias, whereas the 944, they were very smart about their positioning of the engine. The 2.5 four-cylinder was actually sat at a 45-degree angle in the engine bay. So there was a lot of cool stuff with the 944 that made it, on paper, you know, scientifically, just looking at the numbers, you know, 50-50 weight distribution. You've got a robust, higher kind of a higher displacement four-cylinder, 2.5-liter engine with a turbo. So you've got some tuning capabilities there, right? But now in modern times, a factory 944 turbo, you know, the parts are hard to come by. The parts are expensive. This is a German car, okay? The parts are really expensive and hard to find for a stock 944 turbo engine. So the point is, Will's 944 retains that transaxle. And a lot of LS swap 944 owners, in fact, do that and are able to do that. Oh my God. That's 500 horsepower, easy. Woo! Okay, so it retains the transaxle back there, and it's a 5-speed. A 994 turbo 5-speed transaxle clearly can hold 450 pound-feet of torque at the wheels, okay? So the need to really mess up the weight balance of the 944 when you're doing an LS swap really just isn't there. It's really not there. It's not necessary to completely ruin the driving experience in the twisties when you go for a V8 swap, or more specifically, an aluminum block LS engine, right? Which is really awesome. It feels like the V8 was kind of made for this car. Like, I haven't driven a factory 944 or a 944 turbo, never driven a 924 or a 928. This is my first front engine Porsche experience, other than a first gen Cayenne briefly. But that doesn't count, right? But as far as the 944 goes, like, this feels like what a modern 944 should be. It's NA, okay? I know the factory one had a turbo and everything, but as far as a hot rod goes, as far as like a German-American muscle car hybrid mashup, it feels right at home. It really does. I mean, we're sitting at 2,000 RPM, and you hit it, and you've got a bunch of torque. You got a boatload of torque. And I'm not exaggerating when I say, if you're on the freeway, you're going 70 miles an hour and you're in fifth gear, you can get up to 100 miles an hour in a second to pass someone, like without shifting down. No downshifting, just fifth gear. So it really, there's a positive and a negative to that, and I'll explain, okay? So driving out from Richmond here today, and driving on just kind of like how you would drive normally around traffic and stuff, the car's really easy. It's really forgiving. The clutch is nice, even though it is like a nice spec clutch that can actually hold the torque. But what ends up happening is you're driving along, and because there's that like ridiculous torque, and I'm already breaking the speed limit by a lot, allegedly, and so the whole time you're driving around the city, you're doing the speed limit, it feels so incredibly slow, and the car is just begging you and begging you and begging you to floor it, and just to give it the beans, give it that torque, so you can hear that those lovely Cook's long tubes. Oh. So the benefit of starting with a 944 turbo instead of a factory 944 non-turbo is that you get all of the kind of beefier components that the 944 turbo came with that the standard model did not, such as the brakes. The 944 turbo came with progressive springs that the standard car did not have, and then as well it also had a few other suspension components. This one has been fitted with 993 turbo brake rotors, big Brembo calipers. I think they're both still 4-piston up front, maybe 4-piston in the rear as well. So it has upgraded brakes, but the point is, if you start with a factory turbo model, you've got brakes that are going to be adequate for like an LS1 or something, you know, 300, 350 horsepower, maybe 400. That's kind of pushing it, but the 993 turbo brakes on this car, I mean, they hold up very well. The pedal feels a little bit light, definitely a little bit light compared to like the shifter, which is really robust. I don't know what kind of short shift kit, if any, Will has in here, but it's got ground control coilovers up front, and it's got Koni adjustable shocks in the rear. So I don't know much about the 944 suspension setup specifically, but I can say that around slow speed, this particular suspension setup right now, how it's set up, I don't know if it's the spring rates that are not perfectly matched with the dampers. The dampers seem to be doing their jobs wonderfully, but at low speeds, there is a lot of pitch and dive. So that's basically my only criticism of the car. Now, I don't know how you could solve that or what's causing it, but oh my God. Listen to that, you guys. All right, so I want to show you guys a few of the things that really make the 944 stand out, not only as a Porsche sports car, but as a front engine Porsche sports car, which obviously Porsche does not do anymore, right? So there was the 924 before this. and then there was the 928 after this. So this is by no means the only front-engined classic Porsche experience that you can buy. So why is this the one to have? I'll tell you, this fits perfectly in the timeline of modern technology that developed from 1970 to the year 2000 in Porsche, that in my experience makes this the perfect analog driving experience, classic analog driving experience that still has a bunch of modern comforts. It's still a really comfortable car. You've got electronic mirrors in the later models. After the 1985 facelift, you had a very 90s kind of modern interior. You've got a bunch of electronics on the car, electronic seats, you've got cruise control, you've got an LSD in the back, and it was still lightweight, whereas the 928 that came after it, the 5-liter V8, was more of a GT car. It was heavier, it was more bulky, and in my opinion, it just didn't look quite as gorgeous as the 944. In '87, the USDM 944 Turbo was actually the first production car worldwide to have both driver and passenger airbags as standard. This was the first car to have standard airbags up front. So that's pretty cool. This one definitely does not have airbags. It was not optioned with them, I guess. It is an '86, so maybe that's why. But this is kind of what I'm trying to say, you guys. It is a sweet spot in the front engine Porsche lineup that spanned from the 70s all the way to 95. I'm gonna be honest, it's scary fast. This car needs no more horsepower. No more horsepower. Somebody, you know, is probably gonna go in the comments and be like, give suggestions on what Will should do as far as a turbo setup is concerned, or a twin turbo or a supercharger. Not needed, absolutely not needed. And it would probably destroy the car, to be honest. This is so much power. Like, there's honestly so much torque at any point in the rev band. Oh my God. Definitely a little nose heavy up front. But you do get some nice lift-off rotation, which is nice. And if you want, obviously, a lot of oversteer. We're running Pilot Super Sports right now. This is one of my favorite V8 cars I've ever driven. It has so much personality, and it feels so American, but so European at the same time. You look up the side view mirror, the hips on the 944. Oh my God, those rear fenders are probably my favorite part visually of this car. I think the side profile, like I was saying, I can't get enough, and I really hope you guys are on board with me on this one. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to swap these cars. The 4 cylinders aren't nearly as reliable as this LS V8, so you get basically double the power. We've doubled the power here, and you have double the reliability, if I was to just throw out a number. So, you know, the only people I see commenting and looking at this car and saying that it's blasphemy, this is terrible, you shouldn't have never done this, would be those purists who think, yes, swapping out the original motor out of a 944 Turbo specifically is kind of a shame. But I don't know, I'm kind of sold on the whole thing. I don't subscribe to the idea that you can only be a fan of certain cars, certain engines, and that if you put an LS, let's say in an E36 like we filmed recently, or an FD that we filmed a couple years ago, that car is no longer carries the spirit of the original car. And I would have to disagree. Just absolutely ridiculous how fast it is. The 944 definitely has lived up to every expectation I had for this car, and more specifically, every expectation I had for an LS swapped 944. We'll definitely got this one with the right engine. I mean, 500 horsepower at the crank, in a car that barely weighs 3,000 pounds. The 944 weighed anywhere between 2,800 and 3,100 pounds. So it's a light sports car. By modern standards, it's a good weight for a sports car. You still get the stability, but you have that power to weight ratio so that you don't need any more than 500 horsepower. Anyways, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit me up on Instagram at Roads Untraveled. You can kind of see what we're shooting on a day-to-day basis. Go hit up autodromo.ca. Go hit up autodromo on Instagram, and Will as well. Thank you so much, Will, for letting me drive your car today. It has been just ridiculously insane. So we also have engine code jet tags on our site. The link is in the description, shop.roadsuntraveled.com. We have an LS1 jet tag. Maybe now we should make an LS3 jet tag. It only makes sense, but either way, the link is in the description. We got a bunch of engines, JDM, American, you name it. Until then, see you next time, guys.